Good evening, and welcome to One People, One Heart, the 9th annual community-wide Jewish Unity event, celebrating the teachings and enduring impact of the Lubavitcher Rebbe of righteous memory. My name is Chevy Garari, and it is my honor to serve as your Master of Ceremonies this evening. 4 years ago, my husband and I and our little daughter Mushka made the journey across the country to Maple Valley, where we established a Jewish center and have the privilege of serving the local Jewish community there. Like thousands of shluchim around the world, we came inspired by the Rebbe's vision to bring Judaism, godliness, and love for every Jew to every corner of the world. Tonight we gather to honor the Rebbe, whose 32nd yahrzeit will be commemorated next week on the 3rd of Tammuz. We will begin this evening with prayer. Our tradition teaches that there is tremendous strength in prayer when 10 Jews gather together. How much more so tonight, with hundreds of souls standing as one people, one heart. Together, we beseech God for our personal needs and the needs of our people. We pray for peace, safety, and security of our Jewish brothers and sisters in the Holy Land during this difficult time and throughout the whole world. We ask for prosperity, blessing, healing, and protection. May our united prayers carry a power far greater than any one voice alone, and may they bring revealed goodness, comfort, and salvation for all of Am Yisrael. It is now my honor to introduce our regional director, Rabbi Shalom Ber Levitin. In 1972, the Rebbe sent Rabbi and Mrs. and Rebbitzin Levitin to establish a Chabad in the Pacific Northwest. More than 5 decades later, their impact can be seen throughout our region, in the countless communities, institutions, and lives they have helped build and inspire. We warmly welcome Rabbi Levitin for the recitation of Psalm 125, corresponding to the Rebbe's chapter of Psalms this year.
I just want to say a few words before I say the Kapitel of Tehillim. I want to give a Yashikayach to Rabbi and Mr. Shmuley Chaya Levitin for organizing this beautiful program, and to the Rabbanim who are here, the Shluchim and the Shluchas who are here, and B'chlal to everybody who came to show their support, recognition, together the Am Echad, one people. I want to say that standing here, preparing almost 32 years after the Rebbe's Estalkut, the Rebbe's physical passing, is in some way the difficult moment for me personally. Having my Rebbitzin, who couldn't be here tonight, she's in New York by a simcha, a family simcha, or she stayed on from the simcha, so I'm going back for another simcha, Mitzvah Tuesday night. To have the acharayis, the responsibility and the trust of the Rebbe and the Rebbitzin, that we should come out those years back in 1972 in October, in the mission and the responsibility that we were entrusted with. And it's not us, it's the shluchim and the shluches who continue by the hundreds and thousands throughout the world, beyond the Pacific Northwest, to carry the message, the validation of each and every one of Klal Yisrael, the Noachite code for all of humanity, to recognize the one God, and to make this habitat and infuse it with spirituality, transform it, make it a mochen shifte b'leis barach for the godly presence, and eventually to the Gula Shleim B'kar of Mamish, the ultimate redemption, and the Rambam writes, the end of Hilchot Malachim, that all will participate of Klal Yisrael, all those who are following the Noachite code will participate and live to that moment. May it be speedily in our time. One further observation. The young shluchim and shluchas who today go out into the small communities who have to homeschool their children. We have some here who cannot have a cheder cannot have a school where to send their children physically, but have to homeschool and have them assist, and that is a self-sacrifice. I mentioned in previous years, I'm not sure if my Rebbe and I, when we went out from the first generation, would have gone to a place where we didn't have chinuch. And homeschooling is not an easy task. And there's a special feeling that I have for those shluchim and shluchos in the smaller communities who are there and providing what Yiddishkeit imbues into the world in which they live, and their children should have a richas yom v'shalom tevis and true chassidish nachas from the children, from the young boys and young girls being raised in those mektemis which are further removed than from the communities like Seattle, Portland, the larger communities in the Northwest. So without further ado, I want to say the blessing, the Rebbe's Kapitel Kuf Chav Hei, and have in mind that all our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael who are going through a difficult moment, beyond a difficult moment, Shut Hashem Keravayin, salvation from above can come in a split second to bring the embassy Yeshua, the real salvation of peace and redemption, and for Klal Yisrael throughout the world, which is also going through a very difficult moment. And we should be strong and resolute in who we are, comfortable in who we are, and wherever we go to project the starkheit, that strength that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has imbued in us with our neshamas, with our holy souls, to be strong, to project ourselves comfortably as Jews in whatever environment we find ourselves. And that will bring the redemption because of Mamash. Chapter 125. Shir Males, Habitchem, Badanoi, Katsiel, Yimad Leilam Yeshiv. Yushalayim Harm Savala, Badanoi, Savalame Mata, Badelam. Kalei Nuach Shevet, Resha, Algedal, Atadikal Man, Leishluch, Atadikim, Bavlosa Yadeim. Hetiv Varna Latavim, Lishoram, Bilibaisam. Thank you, Rebbetzin Harari. Where are you? Thank you for your introduction. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Please welcome Rabbi Kutenik, the Av Basin of Vad HaRabbanim of Greater Seattle, in leading Psalm 20.
Ram Natseach Mizmor LeDavid Yancha Adonai B'yom Sora Yisagevcha Shem Elohei Yaakov Yishlach Ezracha Mikodesh U'mitzion Yisadeka Yizkor Kol Minchosecha V'yogosecha Yidashen Esela Yitzad lecha kilvavecha v'chol atzosecha yimalei V'nana v'shuasecha v'shem leheinu nigo Yimalei Adonai kol mishalosecha Ato yodati ki yoshi Adonai mishicha Yaneu mishamei kodsho Biguros Yesha Yemina Ede Borecha V'yegav Susim Anachnu V'shem Adonai Eloheinu Naskir Hema Koreu V'nafolu V'anachnu Kamnu V'nisadod Adonai Hoshia HaMelech Yaneinu V'yom Koreinu.
Thank you. If words are the pen of the heart, then music is the pen of the soul. A niggin is a Hasidic melody, far more than a song. It carries the soul upward and awakens a deep connection to God. We now present an uplifting musical presentation by violinist Claire Larson and cantor Yitzi Heisler, featuring two beloved Chabad nigunim. The first is the Poltaver niggin, a stirring Chabad melody taught by Rabbi Yaakov Mordechai Espalav, the renowned rabbi of Poltava, Ukraine, in the early 20th century. The second, Anem Zmiros, was taught by the Rebbe on Simchat Torah 1961 and expresses the soul's longing to draw closer to God. Together, these melodies evoke feelings of yearning, inspiration, and devotion, lifting the heart and soul through the power of a niggin. So please, sit back, open your hearts, and enjoy.
Shirim Aron Wiki Eilecho Nafshi Saroy Nafshi Chamda B'Tzel Yodecho Oy nafshi chamdo b'tzel yodecho lo das kol rasoidecho anim zmirois shirim
Thank you. We live in a world that feels more uncertain than ever. Anti-Semitism is rising, and Israel is constantly under attack. The pace of change is moving faster than we can sometimes process. Technology, social media, and a constant stream of distraction pull our attention in every direction. So many of us are left wondering, what will tomorrow bring? What can we hold on to when the world around us feels so fragile? In moments like these, we need something deeper, something stronger than the headlines, stronger than the fear, stronger than the changes happening around us. As Jews, we know that the soul itself is light, a godly spark that remains pure, strong, and unbroken. But the question is, how do we access that light? How do we allow it to guide us, to uplift us, to give us purpose, clarity, and identity? This evening, we have the privilege of hearing from someone who has dedicated his life to helping people uncover that inner strength and live with deeper meaning. It is a tremendous honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Rabbi Jacobson is a pioneering speaker, educator, and mentor to thousands around the world, and the author of the best-selling book, Toward a Meaningful Life, which has sold over 500,000 copies and has been translated into 13 languages. He is the founder and dean of the Meaningful Life Center, described by the New York Times as a spiritual Starbucks, bringing timeless Torah wisdom to people of every background in a way that is practical, relevant, and deeply meaningful. For over 14 years, Rabbi Jacobson was entrusted with publishing the talks of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, working in close association with the Rebbe, and helping preserve and share more than 1,000 of the Rebbe's talks. Today, he is one of the most sought-after Jewish voices, bringing messages of purpose, meaning, and hope to audiences across the globe. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Rabbi Simon Jacobson.
Thank you so much. Good evening, rabbis, chief rabbis. It's a true honor to stand here before you as we recognize this great leader, Lubavitcher Rebbe, and especially distinctly for me, as was just mentioned, I sat at the feet of this great man, as many others did, and I wouldn't be standing here today. I wouldn't be who I am today were it not for him. So it's also a personal debt of gratitude. After my book was published, Torah Meaning for Life, which was originally in 1995, it was 1 year after the Rebbe's sad and tragic passing in 1994. So the publisher, William Morrow, at the time, today it's HarperCollins, sent me out on a book tour. I had no clue what a book tour was, but that's what they said you do. I don't even know if it exists today, but you send an author to different bookstores across the country. And those days, the internet was just beginning to bud. So the primary media was print, radio, and TV. So the publicist schedules for you different interviews. And then in the evening, you speak at the different Barnes and Nobles, and there was also then Borders, was another chain. Well, many fascinating stories that I could share, but the one I'm sharing here happened in Lexington, Kentucky. Lexington, Kentucky, there was a independent bookstore called Joseph Beth. There was a bookstore in Cincinnati, and Lexington is an hour drive from Cincinnati. So after I spoke at Joseph Beth, they drove me down to Lexington. There I wasn't speaking, I just go to sign books, and then they write autograph book. Now Lexington, Kentucky, what shall I say, is less Jews than there are in this room right here. That doesn't mean there shouldn't be a Chabad house. There wasn't a Chabad house yet. Now there is. And just in case you like trivia, the Cincinnati airport happens to be in Lexington, in case you need to know that information. There is a website called uselessknowledge.com, so there is room for everything. So I come to the bookstore, and I go over to the woman at the desk, and I tell her the name of my book, Torah Meaning for Life. And the subtitle is The Wisdom of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. And down below is my name in smaller letters. The woman looks it up on the computer, and suddenly she turns pale, and something clearly disturbing her. I had no clue what. And she looks at me like this blank stare. And then I hear her get on the phone to the manager upstairs, and she thought I wasn't able to hear what she said, but I did hear. And she whispers, she says, Rabbi Schneerson is back. That's what she said. Yeah. Clearly she wasn't Jewish. Jews are not so easy to... Anyway, and I remember thinking to myself, because it says the Rebbe's name on the book. And so the manager comes running downstairs, and they're both catering to me, and they said, we'll bring you a cup of coffee. How are you feeling? You know, it must have been a long trip. I promise you, this is a true story. Only in Lexington, Kentucky. And we'll call the media. I mean, I knew what was going on in their mind. I decided, you know what, I'll play along. How often does one have an opportunity to play Rebbe, with all respect? But I couldn't do it for too long, because I saw the real thing, so, you know. And finally, I had some compassion, and I said to them, I have to apologize, you know. I'm sorry to tell you that I'm not Rabbi Schneerson. I worked for him. And they were visibly disappointed. So you can read as you wish into the story. There's a story exactly as it happened. And the reason I mention it is because in a certain way, our sages tell us that a tzaddik, a righteous person, a man of God, whose entire life is dedicated not to himself and to his own interests, but to God's cause and to the people, does live on. Actually, a powerful statement that the wicked, even in their lifetimes, are considered dead. And the righteous, even in their deaths, they're considered alive. But here's the real question. It's always good to begin with a question. A question I'm asked all the time. I don't know if any of you think about it, but I'm sure some of you may have, especially an evening like this. And I just get the question every year around this time of the year, because we now honor the next few weeks, the anniversary, the yahrzeit of the Rebbe. And the question is 32 years since the Rebbe's passing. That's a generation. A big part of Chabad, I never saw the Rebbe physically. Many of you may never have. So why are we still talking about a man that hasn't here for 32 years? 34 years since he had a stroke. The last time we heard him speak was over 34 years ago. How could a person like that still be relevant? So I have a journalist who every year just calls me without fail. He's a cynic / skeptic, always with this question. Every year I have to give him another answer. And it's a good question. Sometimes, I guess, people who are committed and are considered students or chassidim of the Rebbe maybe don't ask that question. But there's a big world out there that would ask a question like that. I want to address that question this evening, even for those of us that may not wonder. It's a good question. And as always, Jews like to answer questions with questions. So just to make it even more exciting and controversial, let's say this, phrasing it in one of the questions that I was asked. There's no company on earth that can function without a CEO. Many companies, even with a CEO, barely can function. So here's Chabad. Its CEO, seemingly, as I said, passed away over 3 decades ago. And not only is it functioning, it's thriving. It's probably quadrupled since 1994, maybe more. And it continues to grow. So who's running the show? How's that happening? You now have one Chabad ambassador, one Chabad shliach that quit his job. And as I said, it's only doubling and tripling and further than that all over the world, without any sign of waning. So where does that come from? And to put it even more bluntly, imagine if you can bottle that formula, which company, which corporation wouldn't want to know how you can perpetuate something without a physical leader there? So I'm going to try to answer these questions this evening. So I've set myself up here, right, for either it'll work or it won't, right? We'll find out. So there are many challenges we face today, as we just mentioned, some of them. And you really want to know the litmus test of a true leader. You have to look at how it addresses the challenges that you and I deal with, our personal challenges. Not just philosophical, the abstract, on the ground, in real life. So I want to address some of those big challenges. What may be the biggest headline today? Well, for Jews especially, definitely Israel, Iran, the Middle East, anti-Semitism. But in the larger world, the biggest headline that you'll see literally dominating the news is AI. You've all heard of that? Anybody here hasn't heard of it? Okay. AI, with all its promises bigger than the Industrial Revolution, and no one really knowing where it's going, but clearly trillions of dollars are being invested in it. And interestingly, looking at AI, I was able to find an answer for this year's annual question of this journalist of the Rebbe's contribution. But I want to put it this way, not just contribution. What we hope to discover here this evening is not a simple matter, it's actually an indispensable contribution of the Rebbe that I would suggest and submit that if a person becomes aware of it, you discover it's something that is absolutely necessary in your life. So perhaps a good way to frame it. I don't know if you've ever heard of a guy called Chaim Gedalia Rickover. Anybody? Chaim Gedalia Rickover. His known name is Adam Rickover. Hyman, sorry, not Adam. I'm confusing with Adam and Eve. Hyman Rickover. Hyman Rickover was a Jew who was born in Eastern Europe in 1900. 2 years right before the Rebbe. He was born in 1902. And due to the pogroms going on then, which was the first major immigration of Americans, Jews to America, he was one that came with his family in the early 20th century. He worked his way up. He became a 4-star admiral in the US Navy. I believe in the Navy 4-star is the highest, not 5. And he was known as the father of the nuclear navy. He's a brilliant man in many ways. In 1957, which is around 7 years after the Rebbe assumed leadership, so we're talking right 10 years after World War II basically, he gave a very historic talk in Washington, D.C. And in his talk, he compared the output of energy, right? Energy output is like the foundation of our industrial society. The output of energy in 1857 compared to 1957. And this is what he said, that in 1857, right at the outset of the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, 94% of energy was generated by either animals or human beings. People toiled in fields. Remember, it was the agricultural age, Industrial Revolution had not yet taken over. In 1957, 95% of energy is generated by machines and fossil fuels. It's a significant difference. And he talks about two consequences that resulted from that. I'm going to focus on the second one primarily. The first one was the explosion of wealth and prosperity. Because whoever controlled the farms in 1957, okay, they were perhaps wealthy, but can't compare it to those that controlled the buttons of the industrial age. So prosperity, wealth, suddenly skyrocketed in ways that no one could even have imagined. The second is the birth of something called leisure, free time. When most people are spending 9 or 10 hours toiling in a field under the hot sun in order to come home with a bushel of potatoes or rice or bread or grain. So besides the fact they don't have time for therapy and neurosis, in addition to that, they have no time for anything. And anything extra they traded. Now suddenly, all that's being taken care of. So what happened with all the free time? So this he doesn't address at length, but I want to talk about that. Now that's 1957. Now let's turn the clock, now 2026. It's almost 100 years later. Compared to 1957, you tell me. AI promises to remove all the other things that remained for us to do So it's not just washing machines and air conditioning and all the other machines that we have, that literally we will not have to do anything, the machines will do everything for us. So what are we going to do with all this free time? It's not something a lot of people are comfortable talking about. Because today you can check on your phone, by the way, and you can see how many hours you spend, let's say on, if you've ever heard of a thing called video games, like let's say Candy Crush. Yeah, some of us rabbis know these things. Because we have to help others dealing with their addictions. You know. So, but nobody wants to know. Many people shut that off. Because you suddenly find out you spend 5.5 hours. You know, you can, this way you could dismiss it. So we've got a lot of leisure, a lot of free time, and what are we filling it with? So, 1950, as I said, is when the Rebbe becomes the 7th Chabad Rebbe. The first time in history that a Rebbe is a leader of the Jewish people in a time of freedom. Turn the clock back, the last few thousand years, we've always had to deal with some enemies in a very literal sense. Whether it was Yimach Shemam, the Nazis during World War II, or the Cossacks, the communists after them, and the pogroms I mentioned, the early 20th century. And then you go back, and you have the Inquisition and the Middle Ages being expelled, being executed, country after country. Very little time, very few years that were years of respite. And the Rebbe is now faced with a new world. And here's you'll see the power of a visionary. A visionary is someone, that's why they're called visionary, that sees something that no one else sees. They see the bigger picture. Ezu chacham hareyas haneled. The wise person who sees the horizon. You know, most of us see the moment in which we live. Maybe a few moments before, a few moments after. But to stand on the mountain and have a bird's eye view, that's what a visionary is. So the Rebbe as a visionary is facing now a new situation. Most of the Jews at the time in 1950 were basically licking their wounds, and for the right reason. After 1/3 of our nation was decimated in the Holocaust, 1/3, 6 million out of 18 million, 1.5 million innocent children. So what were we doing? Trying to rebuild. And all those that survived were not in good shape. You mean Europe was with millions of people who are orphans, widows, widowers, no families, no cities, nobody wanted them. So the first thing you do, you try to rebuild. And the Rebbe came immediately with a blueprint. Obviously, he did everything possible to help rebuild Jewish life, both materially and spiritually, but that was not enough. He made a statement immediately upon assuming leadership that we're going to change the world. I'm paraphrasing it, but basically we have a mission, each one of us, not just to survive and not just make it through, but we're going to change the world and we're going to finish the job that for thousands of years the Jewish people have been fighting for, which is to create a messianic world, a world of world peace, a world mentioned by Rabbi Levitin, a world filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. I wasn't born yet in 1950, but I heard from people who were there and I was very intrigued. And I said, what was the reaction? So most people didn't even be able to begin to even fathom such a vision. Some were actually even like skeptical even. You can change the world, look what just happened to the Jewish people. But I would put it this way, what the Rebbe did was, he went to war against a new enemy. No, yes, it's true, we no longer had the enemy from without, but there was another enemy, the enemy of apathy. Apathy is an outgrowth of leisure. Apathy is an outgrowth of free time. Free time is beautiful, it's freedom. But one of the side effects is we become apathetic because we take things for granted. The Jews could never afford to take things for granted in 1935, or 1835, or 1735, or go back all the way to the destruction of the temples. Because we were always on our toes because we had to fight for survival. As I said, barely will you find even a few, maybe here and there, some decades during the Spanish Golden Era or other times like that, of real freedom. And we were always knew that we were at the mercy of our hosts. And here suddenly Jews are given real freedom. And the side effect is, yes, apathy. In Yiddish it's called Gleichgültigkeit, or in Hebrew adishut. Like the guy that said to his friend, what's worse, apathy or ignorance? And he answered, I don't know and I don't care. That's apathy. It's a kiss of death. You know, when someone disagrees with you and they're passionate, at least you have someone to argue with. But if you're sharing with someone life-shattering experience and they yawn and fall asleep on you, how do you deal with that? How do you fight that? There's no one home. Apathy. An outgrowth of blessings. And the Rebbe would not let himself nor anyone else rest. People wonder, why didn't the Rebbe just acknowledge, you accomplished, you built an organization. I can't tell you how many times I just said, I'm sure you have stories. Every time you told the Rebbe, we just built a new institution, spent millions of dollars, we have children coming to school, and the Rebbe would immediately say, okay, what's the next step? And some thought the Rebbe's like not being that sensitive. What about all the work that went into it? Because the Rebbe did not let the guard down because he knew the danger. I would even say the cancer of apathy. And Ronnie Perlman came once by the Rebbe and said he's going to give $1 charity for every Jew on earth. Then it was something like 14.5 million Jews. And the Rebbe's response without hesitation was, the money has already been spent. I'm here to share with you the good news. The money has already been spent. I'm ready for the next installment. This was not lack of appreciation. It was recognizing that we cannot afford luxury of leisure, because that will become a real cancer. That will become a real nightmare, because that's what it creates. It creates a vacuum, both psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. So the Rebbe launched a war, waged a war against apathy. So I don't know if the Rebbe was aware of Rickover's analysis, but he clearly was aware of the problem. And in many ways, I was thinking about it because I heard the interview. So Joe Rogan is interviewing Elon Musk. You've heard of these people, right? And he asks him, once AI is going to take over, in the sense where all malachta chanas al yedei Hashem, that's not what he used, that expression. When all our work will be done by machines, so what are we going to do all day? That question. So Rogan, everybody junk in, junk out. Everybody comes up with their own, we'll play golf all day. What else will you do, right? Now you can play golf all day. That story they tell about the guy that was in a small town. He's fishing, he loves to fish. And he's he's an expert at it. So every day he's sitting there by the water and he's fishing. One day there's a tourist comes by, a businessman. He sees the guy is a real a proficient fisherman. And he says to him, how often do you do it? He says, I do it every day. How many fish do you catch? He says, I catch enough and there's a little extra I sell. He said, maybe we'll go into business together. What's the business? He says, I'll invest and we'll hire other fishermen. You'll train them. And then we'll have a lot more fish and we'll sell them and we'll start making money. And he says, and then what? He says, then we'll buy a fleet of boats. We'll take them out and we'll get even better fish out in the deep sea. And then what? He says, we won't even have to go. We'll just pay others and we'll be making all the money and we can stay home. He says, and then what? He says, then we'll become very wealthy and we'll retire. And then what? He says, and then we'll go fishing. So he says, well, I'm doing that already, Or I can't resist another one. I'm not here to make jokes, but it just captures there's an old Jew sitting on a bench, very depressed one day. And his friend comes over, he says, why are you so down? He says, my wife is very angry at me today. He says, what's new? She's always angry at you. He says, no, today's something special. What? She was going to work and she asked me, what am I going to do today? And I said, nothing. And she said, you said that yesterday. I told her I wasn't finished. Okay, so you get the gist. You could fill in the blanks. The point is, we laugh at it, but it's something that actually captures a certain element of human nature that we unfortunately will gravitate often to the lowest common denominator if you can get away with it. If you can just get away, no pressure, we all love it. But it firstly goes against the grain of human nature. And the Rebbe actually talks about it when the Rebbe turned 70 in 1972. And he was shared that he was getting letters from people. It's time for him to start slowing down. At 70 years old in the United States, you're starting to think about retirement. And the Rebbe dismissed it outright, saying that you don't look at a person's age on the passport. A whole talk, but it wasn't just dismissing it. If you look at those talks, I actually use it as a basis for a few chapters in my book on work and productivity. The Rebbe analyzed the very nature of a human being, how retirement goes against the very grain, the idea that Adam lo amal yavalad, a person is created to produce. So yes, it may be comfortable not to do anything all day, and do nothing, but it goes against the human nature. And God created us that way, that Adam reitze b'kav shalei yesem etisha kav mishal chavere. So the Talmud in Bava Metzia says that a person naturally desires one measure that you earn on your own than 9 measures that you receive as a gift. Now you could buy a lot more with $9 million than with $1 million. But there's something about it that you receive as a gift. It's called bread of shame, nema d'chsufa in the Talmud. You blow it quicker as well because it's not yours. There's something about owning, something about making it yours, integrating it, internalizing it. And understanding human nature, the Rebbe took that opportunity, even though he was talking about himself, but turned it into a universal message to all of us. Are you living up to your potential? A human being, yes, even if you had all the money in the world, you think it's a blessing to do nothing all day? You were sent to this world for a purpose. Are you living up to that purpose? So in many ways, the Rebbe was addressing the antidote to Rickover's statistic of how much leisure will take over. And now AI made me think about it more than ever. And there was no AI, at least not the way we know it today, back in 1994, 1992. But that's a visionary. The Rebbe gave us a relevant, not just relevant, I would say a critically relevant message for our time, because that's exactly what's going to be happening. So Joe Rogan said, we'll play golf all day. Another equivalent of either fishing or doing nothing. And interesting, Elon Musk, of all people, his response was, and it was not coming from a religious place, he said, no. We human beings will be getting in touch with the wisdom of the universe. That's what he said. And now I'm not here to advocate for Elon Musk. We didn't come to talk about him. But I think to myself, how does a man like that, how did he come to that? Whatever he means by that. But it's definitely not sit around and do nothing and play video games. So here's a perfect example that when you look to the Rebbe's teachings, he was speaking about things far ahead of his time. Yes, he talked about technology, he talked about many modern contemporary events, but this is a real issue. And I'll just point out just another number. The rate of fentanyl addiction, which is also on the news, the young people, or not so young, addictions of all sorts, whether it's drug, alcohol, gambling, sexual addictions, and the whole list, physical or psychological. Where do you think that comes from? From a lot of free time. Again, you're spending 10 hours under the hot sun, struggling to bring home a little food for your family. There's no time to get addicted to anything. The vacuum isn't there. And it's only growing. And it's only growing. And the Rebbe provided us with an entire blueprint. Just for the record, the rabbis told me they had to go out for a reason. It's not because I said anything that offended. No, I know that it's important to underscore. But Rabbi Levitin, as long as you're here, I feel, yes, and Rabbi, yes, as well. This is a visionary. So if you ask the question, is the Rebbe, the Rebbe is 32 years since his passing, but these teachings didn't pass. These are teachings that live today, and I would say more relevant today than even back then. I'm always marvel, even though I spent my entire life almost studying and trying to appreciate the Rebbe's teachings, I continuously marvel at the relevance of things that you couldn't even have anticipated back then. That's a visionary. So the answer, my friends, is the Rebbe is not a CEO, Chabad is not a corporation. Chabad is a spiritual movement, a Torah movement that is based on Torah, that is eternal, here thousands of years, and is still living Torah. And the Rebbe, as a representative, just like Moses in his time, is a living entity, because these lessons and the teachings are relevant to us today, just as much then and even more so, I would argue. So I want to dig a bit deeper into this point. One of the fundamental principles that the Rebbe taught was the value, the absolute value of every individual. Of every individual. You know, there's a stereotype out there that religion demands conformity. You know, some people will say, yeah, they're like herd mentality. Everyone just follows like sheep. The truth is, it's the exact opposite. Judaism has produced the most fierce individual spirits in all of history. Jews, if anything, are always rebelling one way or another. So I'll share a story with a 17-year-old boy who grew up in Crown Heights, USA. How many of you have been to Crown Heights? Okay, good. And this 17-year-old grew up in a Chabad family, went to Chabad schools, and he had his questions. He was a skeptic by nature, and he wasn't particularly inspired by his schooling as much as he was studying Torah, Talmud, Chassidus, and so on. And he was seeking, in retrospect, he would say, he was seeking a cause that he can passionately commit to. What we call a rebel without a cause. And he didn't find it immediately in his community for different reasons. But then he was once listening to a talk the Rebbe delivered in the mid-70s, early 70s, about what is known as the 60s. The rebellious 60s. The young rebelling against the conformity of what was called the man in the gray flannel suit. And the Rebbe was saying that many people think when young people rebel, it's a bad thing, because they're challenging the status quo, they're challenging establishment, they're challenging society's norms. Yeah, they're creating upheaval, as we saw that happening in the 60s. And the Rebbe said that's a big mistake. The rebellion in a young person is the fire of the soul that wants to change the world and is frustrated and doesn't know how. So it acts out. It's not disciplined yet, doesn't have the experience. It would do well if adults, if they don't appreciate it, they should get out of the way. If they do, they should help harness this fire toward creating a spiritual revolution. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the spirit of it. And the Rebbe called upon his own community, the Chassidim, the Shluchim, and so on, to go to the college campuses, to go wherever, and harness that fire. Harness it. Now for this 70-year-old, this was a little interesting, because you usually don't think of a person sitting in what we call the ancient garb, Hasidic garb, as someone that speaks in such revolutionary terms. You know? And recognize that the Rebbe was really, ultimately, a revolutionary, a spiritual revolutionary, a divine revolutionary, and wanted to change the world. No, the status quo was not enough, even if it was comfortable. And this sparked in this young man a journey, a process, and where he finally did find his cause. And he's standing here right now before you tonight. That's me. So I'm still 17 years old with 52 years of experience. We can figure out my age if you want to take a second or two. You got it? Okay. People like to figure out ages, I guess. And as I said at the outset, there's a sense of debt and gratitude. God gives us souls, but then there are those special people, a mentor, and the Rebbe, the ultimate, the quintessential mentor, that sparks the soul, that ignites something in you, that changes you forever. You know, when you were 17 or 18, if you had someone like that, you know what I mean. Most 17, 18-year-olds today don't have that. Without going into why, but the Rebbe remains that type of voice that whoever you introduce the Rebbe to in the right language can spark that. And you know it's not easy to get through a teenager. There's plenty of competition. But that was the Rebbe's power. And you don't have to take my word for it. Here you have Rabbi Levitin and his dear wife, as you said, in New York right now. How old were you when you came here in 1972? 15? You're still 15. I'm talking about chronologically. But the spirit came to Seattle, New York bred. I know your wife is from Los Angeles, but same idea. And hundreds and thousands of others over the years. Why would suddenly someone pick themselves up from their comfortable community, where they have their family, they have kosher food, synagogues, the Rebbe himself, everything you need, schools, and go, not that Seattle is a bad town, but you're definitely going to have challenges. And you come to a city, I don't know what it was like here, but I know from others, that often you're not even wanted, and you're even called in by some of the establishment. They say, what are you doing here? And you're young, and you don't know anything about business administration, or nonprofit management, or fundraising, or accounting. I think many did know, may not have voted so well. But then go ahead and create a revolution. They change their communities. Where do you think that comes from? That comes from this man that we're talking about here. I say man of God, a visionary who understood what was necessary, but more importantly, the language that would ignite a soul. And when you're young and impressionable, and something captures you and your imagination and your neshama, your soul, it changes you forever. You can't look back. It's not like, and that's how the revolution was created. And that does not die. I remember it was 2 days after the Rebbe's passing. It was a Sunday, at dark Saturday night, Gimel Tammuz, 1994. Sometime in June, I forgot what day in June it was. So I was invited by Larry King. Remember Larry King Live on CNN? She had a show every night. So Tuesday night, I was on Larry King Live, sitting in a studio in New York. No human beings, only cameras. And you have to figure out how to speak to cameras. And I remember it was myself, Rabbi Lipsker from Olav Shalom from the shul in Florida, Bell Harbor, and another opinion. They always had to have a contrarian. And Larry King asked me this question. This was live. Wasn't prepared. And it was also a very emotional moment then. It was literally 2 days after Gimel Tammuz. And he asked me, I understand that the Chabad community is saddened by the passing of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, for the love you have for him and all of that. But why are you so shocked? After all, he's 92 years old. Everybody dies. So why is there such a shock? How do you answer that question? And you weren't prepared for it. So I had to just answer whatever came to my gut. So I said, you have to remember that for us the Rebbe embodied Torah. And Torah was with us for the last almost 3,500 years. And it went through everything. It went through the Egyptian exile, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Persians, the Romans, the Ottomans. Yes, and also the Germans and the Nazis and everything in between, over and under, and it's still here. So there's something eternal about it, something immortal. And when mortality touches immortality, it's more than just sad, it's shocking. So what we're talking about here is not about necessarily an individual. Besides being an individual, we're talking about a representation of something that really all of you and all of us has within us. The Am Yisrael Chai, the eternal flame. Whenever I travel, I'm always amazed of meeting different Jewish communities. Talk about taking for granted our blessings. Every one of you, if you studied your own history, just a generation, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're a walking miracle. Somewhere, some grandparent of yours may have just gotten out the last train or the last out of Europe, Nazi Europe, or may have been out of the Tsarist Russia, a pogrom. You go back a few centuries, everybody has a story. We're not natives. Where did we come from? And then you think about Abraham, Avram Avinu. Abraham. We're talking about 3,800 years ago. It's a long time. And Abraham is told by God, the Bible documents it, that you are going to have a child with your wife Sarah. And that child's going to have children, and those children will have children, and one day, your people will be spread all over the world like the stars in the sky. And he pointed to the stars. Even if you're the biggest believer, you tell me the odds. Abraham and Sarah were quite of age. But they did have a son called Isaac. And Isaac had a son, Jacob and Esau. And Jacob had children. And here we are, every one of us, in direct chain, a direct line, the stars that God showed Abraham. How could you deny the miracle of that? Yeah, we take it for granted because we don't think about it too much. And we don't have to fight for our survival as our grandparents did. So when you think of the Rebbe as a leader, the Jewish people, a leader of the world in many ways, that's what he embodied. Of course, he was a human being of flesh and blood. But what does he embody? What does he represent? Eternity. The Torah is eternity, the eternity of each one of us. So when we honor this individual, we're not honoring a person. I mean, when I say a person, I mean a certain individual. We're honoring the movement. We're honoring what it represents. And that was the Rebbe saw in each person he met. You look at all the stories, all the videos, the dollars, the farbrengens, the personal audiences, the letters the Rebbe wrote, the notes. It all comes down to, are you living up to the potential that you were created with? Basically, that each one of us has a unique, indispensable mission that you and only you can accomplish. This was a common theme. And it wasn't just words. So when you think of it that way, the Rebbe saw in people was not just what they are, but what they can become, or what they're capable of. When you see that again, that is, we heard listened earlier, uplifting, empowering, and transformative. So for me personally, once I recognized or resonated with me this message, it was very clear, not even a question, why does your soul come down to this world? Yeah, we do many things, we build families, we have, I'm sure, many beautiful things we've accomplished. But if you've come to change your corner of the world in some way, and we have all the tools, and we have all the vote of confidence, and that is our mission. That's why shlichut is called shlichus. What does shlichus mean? A mission. A mission is a very powerful statement. It means you were chosen for a particular mission, and no one else can do it but you. I don't know if there's a more powerful message that you could share with yourself, with your children, with your grandchildren. Because everything is driven by that. If you ask somebody, why am I here in this world? And they say, I'm not really sure. Or I've asked this question to many people, do you think you really matter? So, some people giggle, whatever, but let's rephrase the question. If you were never born, would it make a difference to anyone? Remember, if you were never born, nobody's missing you because they're not expecting you. Once you're here, you obviously justify your presence, and we do that in many different ways. We accomplish things, and you probably have plaques on the wall, and you have different awards, and you have a family that loves you. And if not, you hire some people to make sure that they say they love you. And whatever is necessary for our self-confidence. So, on a cosmic level, if you were never born, would it make a difference? There's 8 billion people on this planet, let's not forget. What significance does one grain of sand have on a beach with billions of grains of sand? And I submit that most people maybe don't think about it, but when you start thinking about it, you come to realize, yeah, maybe I'm not that significant after all. Yeah, of course I'm significant to my family, to my support system, whoever's in my immediate community. But on a cosmic level, and comes the Torah and the Rebbe understanding the importance to emphasize that today more than ever, because we can get lost with all technology and everything. We can get lost about the value, the precious sacred value of an individual, the sacred value of your choices. Because let's be honest, if you think about it, you say, well, who really cares how I behave? We're all going to end up in the same place anyway. So I was a better person or worse person. But when you understand the eternal impact of every move you make, that changes everything. This is what the visionary, the Rebbe, teaches. You teach that to your children, it changes everything. It changes how their attitude, their choices. They matter. Yes, your choices matter. And if you don't do what you have to do, in some way the entire puzzle is compromised. Think of it like a cosmic symphony. And you need every piece of music and every musician and every instrument. And if you don't play your piece, something's missing from all of us. So when we say the theme of the evening, one people, one heart, ki ish echad b'lev echad. Yes, beautiful, unity, but it's much deeper than that. It's the unity, the harmony within diversity, that each of us has something unique. We all need each other, and we're all needed. So our mission is to find out what that is, and not just become another number, another statistic. Another very moving story, I would even say definitive event that happened in my experience with my book, Toward a Meaningful Life. I was in the city, Midwest, St. Louis. I remember it was a Monday night, around 1995, 96. I remember exactly the year. You may all remember it because it was the night that all across the country they were doing a memorial service for Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Remember when he was assassinated? So they had all the JCCs, everybody came. So it happened to be my talk was scheduled before that. So suddenly I had a few thousand people. There was usually a few hundred. And I was the speaker. So after my talk, people lined up. I signed some books. I got back to New York. I get a letter, I think it was an email, from a woman. And here I saw, in the most vivid of terms, the Rebbe's unbelievable contribution to life today. So a woman writes to me, and it's etched in my memory because of the power of this letter, as you'll see. She writes that I was in the audience in St. Louis. I was online to get a book signed, and I was going to come over and speak with you, but then it was too long of a line, and then I chickened out anyway, so I decided to write. And she writes the following. I'm a 47-year-old executive in a very prominent firm in St. Louis. By all standards, I'm a success story. Made money, well-connected, influenced, respected. However, beneath the veneer of this success lies a woman in shreds. You see, my soul was murdered when I was a young child, growing up in a very abusive and dysfunctional home. where I endured all types of abuse, physical, emotional, psychological, and sexual abuse. And it killed my soul. I'm a person who loathes myself. I've tried all types of therapy, nothing really works. Relationships are a mess. I don't trust myself, I don't trust others. I'm always testing people, testing. And I've long given up hope. People like myself who lack inner control of our lives, we can create outer control. So I became super ambitious and super active and successful on all these outer levels to soothe some of my inner psychic pain. Doesn't really work. There are days that I literally am suicidal. I'm saying it to you bluntly, exactly as she wrote it to me, so I apologize if this in any way is painful to hear, but it was painful to read. And though I'm Jewish, I've disassociated myself from anything Jewish, because anything connected to my parents, I run the other direction. I don't go to synagogue, I'm no rabbi. But someone gave me a copy of your book. I was just browsing through it, and a line jumped out at me. That's the way she put it, was like a silver bullet between the eyes. It touched this deep, deep chord. The line says, in the chapter on birth, birth is God saying, you matter. And I read it again, birth is God saying you matter. And I read it a third time, birth is God saying you matter. And I don't know why, but after 47 years, something touched me the deepest way. And I will read that line the rest of my life. What touched me was that despite what my parents projected or conveyed to me, that I'm worthless, despite what society values you, that you're nothing more than a statistic on someone's balance sheet. You're valued for your looks, for your youth, for your innovation, for your buying power, for your social status, for your equity. Despite all that, I matter to the one that matters most. And who is that? God. So even if I'm not doing anything that day, even if I'm not productive, and I'm not particularly successful, I matter to God. So though I have many years to heal, this is how she concludes. And you can call it eloquent if it weren't under the circumstances. So though I have many years to heal, my work is cut out for me. I have to create bypass surgery to bypass the infected arteries that were blocked by the abuse I experienced and reconnect to that pure moment when I was born and God said, you're my child, I love you unconditionally, you're indispensable. And then she finally ends the letter by writing, thank you for giving me back my life. Now, I remember when I received it like today, I was sobbing like a child. Really, I couldn't really wrap my head around it. And I was thinking, here's a woman I never met, a woman who never met the Rebbe, and sharing such a sacred trust with me. I went back to actually read the chapter in the book. Because when you read the book, when you write the book, you're the author. Once the reader reads it, it belongs to the reader. I wanted to read it through her lens. And I read it differently, to be honest. I saw it differently, but I understood the value of it. And I wrote her back, thanking her and of course offering my support in any way, asking her permission to tell the story. She gave me permission, but she asked me not to share her name because she knew people want to contact her, either have similar stories, they want to show compassion or whatever. We're still in touch. She's an older woman today. And I'm an older man too, I should add. Or at least I wear the clothing of an older man, let's put it that way. And I wrote back to her that I have to thank you. I mean, this was a series of different letters that I wrote because I grew up relatively okay, a functional home, nothing's perfect, but nothing comparable. And I'm the oldest of 5 children. So, you probably know the oldest is usually spoiled a bit. You could ask my siblings. Let's put it this way, they have to go to therapy for me, I don't have to go to therapy for them. If you're the oldest, you know what that means. I was loved, I felt I was loved, I felt I mattered. But I never had to really challenge that question. She never had that luxury. So I wrote to her in one of my emails to her, I said, sometimes the eclipse of the sun reveals a dimension of the sun you cannot see through its light. Because she never had that luxury, she was never given that blessing. So I don't envy her. But she came to recognize the truth. Why do I matter? Because my parents told me I'm special? Because they took pictures of me and they spoiled me? That's nice. And what happens if one day, God forbid, my parents decided I fell out of favor, so my stocks go down? So it's all dependent on their valuing me or others valuing me? She got it right. The only real reason we are indispensable and truly matter is because birth is God saying you matter, because God put you in this world. That's the only thing that gives you true cosmic and enduring and eternal value. And frankly, I think many of us who don't necessarily feel that way look to compensate it. We look like she did, for success, making money, other ways that people measure success. But it doesn't fill the void, because ultimately it's a soul thing. So I'm thinking about the Rebbe understanding the importance of emphasizing this in our day and age more than ever. Now the truth is the Torah says it all the time. I mean, the beginning of the Torah, the first time a human being is described, that we were each created in the divine image. That gives us that indispensable value. But the Rebbe underemphasized it. He knew the importance of making sure everybody knows it. Moda Ani, the Rebbe was once asked, what's his favorite prayer? He said, Moda Ani, the morning prayer. What is Moda Ani? One of the simplest prayers, but one of the most profound. Thank you for returning my soul to me. That's essentially what we say. What does that mean? Number one, it's showing gratitude. Number two, that you have a soul and that God chose you. And every morning He renews His contract with you. And that means you have a mission that you have to accomplish. And your entire day should be driven by that shechzarta b'nishmasi, that soul, your soul's mission. Are you living up to your soul's mission? This is a visionary. And this message is more important today than ever. I wanted to touch upon one more thing. I don't know what our time is like. But being that we're living in a world with many challenges, I wanted to say, just short, briefly, but it's the same spirit. The Rebbe's message, talking about anti-Semitism, what's going on in Israel, Iran, and so on. I remember a talk the Rebbe delivered, I don't remember when it was, but he was talking about people criticizing the Jewish people for their, the critique was that we're not living up to the highest moral standards. You know, like what they say today, genocide, colonialism, apartheid. I don't even want to repeat it, but just to make a point of reference here. And I remember the Rebbe said with this incredulous tone, that I remember giving me such tremendous pride that I use it till this day. The Rebbe said, they're preaching to us morality. That world that was silent when they were killing innocent children and innocent men, women in the gas chambers, that have been persecuting and murdering innocent Jews for thousands of years, that when we stood at Mount Sinai and we said we will not kill and we will not steal and we will be ethical and we accept a God and we will live life as a virtue, they were still cannibals. They called them Menschenfresser. That's what you say in Yiddish. And they're preaching to us. This doesn't mean that every Jew is perfect. It doesn't mean that everything we do is right. But who gave the world the most cherished values of any given democracy? And I'm not even talking now from a religious point of view. Check out a book called On Two Wings by Michael Novak. He's a non-Jewish writer, where he documents, and his subtitle there is the basis of this 250 years that we're honoring the United States of America. The basis of this country based on, he calls it Torah metaphysics, not even Bible, Torah metaphysics. And documents in actual letters from the founding fathers how all the values, starting with the Declaration of Independent States, that all men are created equal, we hold these truths to be self-evident, all men are created equal, and by virtue of the Creator have inalienable rights. No country before the United States ever institutionalized that statement. All countries were controlled by monarchs, by the church, by despots, by totalitarians, fascists. Where did they get this idea from? It came from nowhere? No, it came straight from the Torah. There's a fascinating medrash that says that if the non-Jewish world would know the blessings that Israel and Jerusalem and the temple provide them, they, instead of attacking Israel, they would surround it with legions to protect it. So this is not just a response to anti-Semitism. This is being that the best defense is offense. We don't need to defend ourselves. These values that today people take for granted are fundamentally come from the Torah. And it was meant to go for the entire world. It's not just meant to be Jewish values. But no one should ever forget where it comes from, and the major religions where they come from. And I say this because I again look back to the Rebbe's teachings and I say, what's the relevance today? More than ever. This is exactly what every one of us needs to know. We need to be proactive Jews. We need to be informed about Israel. There's a lot of ignorance out there. Unfortunately, a lot of young Jewish men and women on the campuses or elsewhere are completely bought into false propaganda. That's called ignorance. So again, you want to look to direction? All you have to do is open up some of the Rebbe's teachings. It talks about it directly. And when you look back now, you see the relevance, as I said before, today more than ever. It's always relevant, but especially with all that's going on today. And it goes back again to finally our personal mission. So I want to just conclude with this. You know, the Rebbe always emphasized that words that are not translated into action are called dvarim b'telim. They're like wasted words. If an evening like this is to be meaningful, it means it means to be empowering to each one of us. Everyone here has their sphere of influence. You know, every one of you, whether it's at work, family, home, where you travel, associates, and today online. Frankly, online you can reach anyone, anytime, anywhere. So we have a responsibility. My father was a journalist, would like to always tell me, there are three types of people. People who make things happen, people who watch things happen, there's a lot of that, and people who ask what happened. We Jews always made things happen. Our hachlata, our resolution has to be an evening like this. This would be the best way to honor the Rebbe, that we have to make things happen in your little circle. Little, big, I'm not measuring now the amount, but we cannot be complacent or apathetic. We're not just observers, bystanders. We have to be active players and take initiative, proactive. And that means inviting someone to your home, having a class, sharing a kind word online. Today is so easy. You don't even have to create it. All you have to do is forward it. But be proactive. Don't wait for something to happen. Every one of us is meant to do that. And that was the Rebbe's words, that every one of us is a shliach of Hashem. Every one of us was chosen. Talk about your life matters. Yes, God chose you, your soul, and put it into this world sometime in the 20th or maybe the 21st century for the younger ones here, into this world, to where you are. And there's a reason why you live where you live, because you have to reach certain people, and they have to reach you as well. We do that, that's ultimately the ish echad b'lev echad, one person, one heart, with all the diversity that each one of us offers. And we will merit, without question, because after all the thousands of years of this great marathon, of all the cumulative billions of mitzvahs and good deeds that were done, that we will merit to see the eruption of it all accumulated in the personal and global redemption of the Geula Amitis V'Ashlema. We will have the cosmic symphony, and every one of us musical notes will sing our song, unique song, while also complementing each other. And may it be now the merit even of this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi Jacobson, for your inspiring and moving words. Thank you all for being here tonight. Just echoing on what Rabbi Jacobson mentioned at the end about taking initiative. As the famous saying goes, Hamaisa hu ha'ikar, the main thing is action. Let's take this inspiration and channel it to good deeds. And a suggestion we'll make to everyone here is to take on a positive resolution, a hachlata, to increase in their Torah study. Whether it's joining a Torah class at your local Chabad, finding Torah online, or setting aside time to learn Torah. Nowadays, there are so many available avenues to learn and discover the Torah. The resolution just has to be made. So let's strengthen each other and make a resolution in that. Wishing you and your families a healthy, joyful, and peaceful summer. Travel safely and have a wonderful evening.